Let's start with public safety.
Okay.
I know that's top of everyone's mind following the murder of Iryna Zarutska, and the signing of Iryna's law. Josh Stein, our governor, signed that just a couple days ago, and so that's kind of top of mind for everyone. But that was a big piece of discussion. Today was City Council's committee day, and so all of these little pieces of government got to really dive in further to the issues. So the Public Safety Committee did kind of a breakdown of mental health services right now. What does CMPD need from us? They had a couple officers there who had gone through kind of that mental health response training process, which a good majority of their officers have gone through. Talking about, what's needed. They had multiple community partners. They also had a Representative Lofton, so they had the state legislature represented. A really interesting discussion, but what it really boiled down to is, for some council members, for particularly Councilmember Malcolm Graham, is this all sounds great, but a lot of the reform we need needs to come from the state, and Iryna's law does not quite cover that. Yes, we need more funding for DAs, courts, all this, but he said Mecklenburg County has been underfunded for decades. Remember, he served for a very long time in the North Carolina Senate, and so really impactful words coming from him. I think a lot of people outside of Mecklenburg County at the General Assembly would disagree with that statement. But at the same time, we're talking about funding for all these resources. Malcolm Graham says this needs to come from the General Assembly. General Assembly still doesn't have a budget. We have passed that deadline, which is not abnormal for North Carolina by any means, but we're supposed to be entering this short session where they're fine-tuning the budget and making edits like this, whereas we don't have one at all right now, and so that complicates this process a whole lot more.
Yeah. Might be worth mentioning to folks too, the lack of budget, how that works on a state level, just because I know we're in the midst of a federal government shutdown, which that's a bit of a different situation than
absolutely.
What we're dealing with in North Carolina. But still, like you mentioned, a wrinkle in so many different efforts and agencies right now because of the lack of a budget here.
Yeah, glad you mentioned that. North Carolina is still able to operate, but that does mean if we don't have a new budget, no raises for state employees, no changes to the funding. So when things like this happen and we decide maybe we need to invest more in to training for magistrates or something like that, they can't really make those edits without passing a budget. And so I think what a lot of people are getting at is Iryna's law, in theory, has a lot of great things in it, but not really an avenue to fund it right now. And I think that's kind of what that boiled down to. CMPD did have some interesting things, though. They said we've kind of increased our patrolling on the light rail, but it is also mental health services. We've got a lack of psychiatric beds statewide, and that's another state issue. But CMPD says it's not just patrolling, it is getting all of our officers trained to respond to these mental health emergencies too. So multiple pieces here, funding that would need to come from different avenues. So it'll be interesting to see what full council has to say about this probably next week.
Yeah, not that we thought it would be otherwise, but I think folks are all really learning here as the dialogue is continuing that this is a much more complicated issue than just doing this or just doing this. I think this is something we're finding is going to need a lot of levers to pull, I guess you might say.
Absolutely, and even pulling those levers have different strings attached to them. The negotiations between Democrats and Republicans has been really interesting to watch, but it really, at this point, comes down to less of red and blue and more of where is it coming from, more like county, city, state, federal, where for all these issues that we need to solve, everything costs money, and where does that money come from is really the big question.
Yeah, I mean, the other big topic you were telling us about has to do with transportation. I know in the evening shows we were talking about the Black Political Caucus that was signing off essentially on this tax that folks will be voting on in November. So that appears to be a pretty big boon for that measure. What can you tell us about other happenings today, I guess, on that front?
You mentioned how there's multiple levers being pulled.
Yeah.
That's the same thing here, and we're kind of working on a really tight time crunch with this sales tax. Multiple groups have come out saying they support this. This would allow our government to, create the red line, which would be a huge change for Charlotte to be able to have a light rail access all the way up through Lake Norman. And it would, also have improvements for buses and for roads. I know a piece of that is improving safety on the light rail as well, and that's become a larger discussion. But you vote on this in November, you're also voting on your city council members in November who are making these decisions right now, not knowing if they're going to be in office in December and January when these decisions have to be done. Something that's interesting in the actual PAVE Act bill, the thing that allowed Mecklenburg County to put this on the ballot in November through the General Assembly, was that it needed to have a new transit authority, and that needed to be formed by January 1st, 2026. That does not give you much time to put that together. There's different pieces of this already. It says that, the governor gets so many seats, the General Assembly gets so many seats. Most of them go to the city and to the county governments, who will get to appoint people. Today, Ed Driggs, Transportation Committee Chair, said they've already received 70 applications. Applications close next week.
Yeah.
So that's a good sign. We want lots of people to apply for this. It gives a lot of work for City Council to look through all these, but there's a high level of interest and engagement so far. The problem, though, is that today they were supposed to push it through as kind of a formality to put it in front of the full council for discussion. There was not really a vote to be had yet, because that's not going to come until November that they vote for who will be on it. Interviews haven't even happened yet. But there was so much disagreement in the committee that they didn't even vote to push the process forward to council for discussion tonight.
Wow.
And like I said, there wasn't even a vote really attached to that. They disagreed so much already that they had to stop it there. Ed Driggs was not happy about that. There was much back and forth. One of the council members who voted to not put it through tonight, or not advance it tonight, was Councilmember Victoria Watlington, and she brought up some interesting points about we need to be clear about representation amongst districts. We want to appoint people that equally represent our districts. There was discussion about giving 2 seats to appoint to Mayor Vi Lyles. She had concern about that because the General Assembly's legislation is very clear in terms of this many seats goes to City Council, this many goes to county. Are we even allowed to change that? Are we technically allowed to do that? And then just what I brought up earlier of, hey, we're voting on this now, in theory, or pushing this forward now, we might not even be here. A lot of us had really tight races, or we might have really tight races coming up. Some of us, we already know, didn't pass the primary and won't be here in come December when some of these decisions get really, really important. So a lot of back and forth there where it just seems to be at kind of an impasse. Not uncommon that ahead of an election like this, things get a little dicey and big decisions tend to hold back because of that. But it's just that we have such a tight time frame for this sales tax that it'll be interesting to see what, if any, resolution comes in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's an eternity away, and yet when you look at the calendar, you're like, oh, actually, it's not. It's just a matter of weeks when folks will have to really decide how they feel about this.
Early voting starts in a couple weeks, too. The ballots, I saw the ballots. They're already being printed at this point. So, I mean, the Board of Elections, we did a story last week about them preparing, like, it's here, essentially. And that decision, once it's made, either way, has big implications for not just City Council, just Charlotte's future as a whole and what that looks like. So it's of course going to have kind of high emotions attached to it, because this is could be a really big piece of our history either way.
Yeah. And to your point of people having to vote on the folks making the decision, it is an interesting timing to have that decision potentially being made and or discussed pretty thoroughly in the headlines and such, with those folks still kind of just, I guess maybe people might not know how they feel about each candidate, or incumbent, if you will. And it might be based on how they vote on this.
Yeah, and a lot of them have been very outspoken about how they feel either way. And so there is a lot out there for people to do their research and see if they align with the people on the ballot. But this is just such an ongoing discussion that who knows what we'll be talking about in 2 weeks. It's just ever changing, I feel like. And with these really tight deadlines, not just January 1st to have it done, but applications close October 13th. I believe the week after that is the interview process, and then November they're trying to decide as election is happening. So it's just boom, 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 boom after this. This is one of many times I think we'll be discussing this particular issue.
Yeah. And I think about, too, you were talking about how the number of applications they've gotten, I mean, it sounds substantial, but then I think about how many seats are supposed to be on this board.
That's true.
And it's like, trying to do quick math, I think it's like 2 to 3 people per potential board seat. Like
I think
it's
so.
right, because it's around 20 plus seats.
You know, I believe that, yes. I'm not sure off the top of my head how many the city of Charlotte is.
Oh, okay. I mean, like overall, because I know you're talking about some, like the General Assembly get to
Yep.
pick some people who sit on this board,
And the
governor,
county and business leaders
yeah.
will have their own. So I'd actually, that's a good question. I should sit down and kind of crunch the numbers about how many applications
I know.
there have been.
It just sounds like a lot with like 70 plus, right? But if they're...
It sounds like a lot in terms of, I guess I go to all these meetings and a lot of times something I think is really interesting, no one cares about. So it sounds like a lot in terms of that is compared to some other things I've seen happen at city council meetings.
Yeah.
That seems to me like high engagement.
Yeah.
But you're right that in terms of there's a lot of seats to fill. They want one per city council and one per county commissioners to be each to have one person that rides the public transit
I heard
consistently.
that. Yeah.
However, if they don't have what is considered a qualified applicant apply, they can do away with that
Yeah.
that piece of it. So that's going to be really interesting to watch. But
Also, how do you vet that? Show us your train ticket?
Right.
Right.
I
I'm
guess
just, it was more just like a curiosity factor.
and there isn't a way in the description. There isn't really much elaboration on that. And so that was some people's complaint about like, hey, you added this because we complained, but there's still a way for you to get out of this part. There's not really a way to check that. And so it will be really interesting to see who of these applicants is appointed.
Yeah.
I'm curious how many of the names we're going to recognize as people that have been very involved in Charlotte
Yeah.
and how many
Vocal people in the community, perhaps.
Mhm. So it'll be interesting to see which direction they go.
Yeah. Is there anything we didn't discuss?
Oh,
that
yes,
happened?
but
Oh,
I'm not.
no. Oh, man.
Nothing as pressing as that.
Okay.
I think council might still be discussing right now too.
I'm looking at a feed. Is that live, Jeb? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
Full council's in session right now. This is just the updates from the committee meetings today. They were,
Okay.
those poor council members were talking all day long in their separate committees. But some interesting things that I know we've heard throughout the newscast. David Tepper talking about that indoor music venue, and it will be fully funded privately, not by public dollars,
Yeah.
which I think people, we're talking about all these taxes and things. People will probably be glad to hear about that. That could be voted on as early as next Monday. So we might have some progress on
Wow.
that very soon.
There's a lot going on.
Tell me about it.
Just when we thought, I think we say this every week, that there's a lot going on, and then the next week happens, and we go, whoa, that's actually a lot of stuff that's going on.
It keeps me busy.
Well, we appreciate you staying on top of things.
Yes.
And for joining us here on Live Impact. You'll have a piece at 11, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, folks can catch up on all of the workings of Charlotte City and county and
Everything.
beyond. Julie, thank you.
Thank